Now for the scarf joint, I didn't have any specialty tools. I don't have a router. I don't have a bandsaw, which could have cut that scarf pretty nicely. I really don't have much in the way of woodworking tools. I have some, but in order to get that scarf as flat and as perfect of an angle as I could, I actually used a method that was suggested by the mahogany supplier. He built a little wood boat a while ago, and he had to do some scarf joints, and what he suggested using was a 4.5-inch angle head grinder with a flap wheel on it. This is an 80 grit sanding flap wheel, and I have tons of experience with these metalworking, so I was very familiar with using it, but it did a fantastic job of taking that material down really quick. I drew my line on the side, and I just started beveling it on this side. Then I dropped to the other side, and I started beveling it to match, and then I beveled the middle. And when I got about a 16th off of my line, then I came over with my 18-inch by 3 belt sander, and I flattened everything off and took it right down to the line, real precise. And I used a straight edge, and I kept laying the straight edge on the angle, on each side, in the middle. Then I started laying it diagonally to make sure there were no crowns in it. And anyhow, that is a very effective method of making a scarf if you don't have a bunch of specialty tools, just a angle head grinder and a belt sander. All right, so here's a look at that 16-foot length of mahogany. This is going to be my chine. And let's take a look at our scarf joint. So there's the top of it. This is after I faired it down. We'll look at the side of it. It's going to be hard to catch. There. You can just barely see the glue line of the scarf joint. So it turned out pretty dang clean. Will it hold up? I don't know, but we're going to find out. We'll get it put on the boat. All right, so here's a look at the keel. I've got both of these pieces beveled and ready for the scarf. So we'll come down here and look at the edge of it, and you can see it's just like paper thin on the tip. And it's supposed to be. It's got to be. Here's a look at this one. And both of these scarves were done with nothing more than just that 4.5-inch angle head grinder and a belt sander. So let's flip this piece over here and take a look at the fit. We'll slide right up to the lines. Okay, sorry I'm trying to do this with one hand here. But there it is. That's what it'll look like, all glued up. So, not too shabby of a scarf for nothing more than a belt sander and a 4.5-inch grinder. So, according to the Glenelg plans, they call for 5/16 by 6-inch carriage bolts. Because I did recess the nut side in both the transom knee and in the stem, I ended up cutting these off. But even if I hadn't have done that, 6-inch bolts would be more than long enough. So these are what I've cut off of those 6-inch carriage bolts. Something else I wanted to talk about, when I started this, I bought 4 of these little mixing cups. Out of building everything up to this point, I'm down to 2. And I didn't realize the epoxy doesn't adhere to this. So if you squeeze them and roll them around, the inside, the excess epoxy you see in there, actually pops out. This is epoxy. It's just hardened. But anyhow, so the cups are reusable. Good to know. Out of the entire boat build, I've only had to throw away 2 so far. This one you can see I've mixed a little bit of wood flour in and used for a filler. I just officially opened my second bottles of G-Flex. So everything up till the keel I did with just the first bottles of G-Flex. So that's actually quite a bit of assembly out of those little bottles there. I also bought these mixing sticks, and I officially just threw away my first one. So 1 package of mixing sticks ought to build an entire boat. Anyhow, just thought I'd give you a little update on that. Well, it's October 1st. So for the month of September, we put in 25.5 hours. That brings our total up to 56.5 hours into the boat, and we have a total of $902.24 invested. So we'll walk over here. And what I've been working on for the last few days, we got the keel. You can see the carriage bolts are in. It is glued down
We'll try to get down. You can maybe see the glue line, maybe not. Anyhow, keel's glued down, shaped. We're countersunk for the carriage bolts. We've got our screws in at each frame, and it's glued to each frame. This is using, of course, the same epoxy I have been. And here is our scarf joint. You can see the line here, although you can't feel it. And laying a flat edge across it, there is no light underneath it. It's perfectly flat. And you might be able to catch it, but the scarf joint runs down right along there. That's the piece I had to scarf onto the end to make my 10-footer 12. Carriage bolts in the rear. I applied a little extra epoxy to fill this gap back here. And we also now have the transom knee installed. It is glued, epoxied to the transom, epoxied to the keel. And it's a very good fit. This material here, my mahogany, is 13/16, and the ply is 3/4. So I had to cut a little step in it actually to make everything fit nice and clean, but it turned out very, very nice. You can see the bolts. They came out right where I wanted them to, just about flush with the top of the transom knee. So everything's turning out really nice. Here's a look at the back of the transom. You can see where I recessed for the carriage bolts, and then I'll apply a mahogany skin over the top of this 1/4-inch marine to hide all of that and be nice and clean. So the keel is officially laid. It's carriage bolted down. It is epoxied down. The two really long ones here, those are my chimes. They are ready to go. All of the battens, I still have yet to do the battens. They're just sitting on here loosely. I've got to finish sand them because they're all just rough cut right now. As you can see, the keel is finished sanded. I'll try to get close here. You can see a real square edge on the batten, and you might be able to catch some of the saw cut on there. Anyhow, so I got to clean all the battens up, and I'll get the rear of them cut at 12 degrees to match the transom, and I'll get those all installed. But that's where we are now. Keel is officially laid. Everything looks good. Everything's lining up. Everything's measuring great. So we'll catch you on the next video. It's coming right along. Looking pretty darn good.